الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All praises belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who said, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولا تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله أمواتا بل أحياء عند ربهم يرزقون. Don't consider those who are killed in the way of Allah as dead, but they are living and given rizq from their Rabb. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also said, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وَلَئِن قُتِلْتُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَوْ مُتُّمْ لَمَغْفِرَةٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَحْمَةٌ خَيْرٌ مِّمَّا يَجْمَعُونَ. If you are killed or die in the way of Allah, then forgiveness and blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is better than what the disbelievers have gathered. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also said, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ وَإِنَّمَا تُوَفَّوْنَ أُجُورَكُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ فَمَنْ زُحْزِحَ عَنِ النَّارِ وَأُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةَ فَقَدْ فَازَ وَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَتَاعُ الْغُرُورِ. Every single person will taste death, and certainly you will receive your reward in hereafter. The one who has been saved from hellfire and will enter Jannah is surely the winner. Indeed, this world is nothing but illusion. After that, may peace be upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who was sent down as a blessing for the whole world and as the best role model for the Ummah. Dear brothers and sisters, it is a great honor for me to be a part of this gathering and to have this opportunity to say something about my honorable father, who recently became a shaheed. I take this opportunity to thank the organizers of this conference and its participants. You have shown great love for your fellow oppressed brother. I believe this love is only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We, the member of Bangladesh Jamaat-e-Islami, love all our Muslim brothers for the sake of Allah, especially those belong to Islamic movement. It is narrated in a hadith that on the day of judgment, where the sun would be directly above the head of people and there would be no shade except for the shade of Allah's arsh, the mighty throne, those who loved each other for the sake of Allah would be under its shade. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala include us among them in the day of judgment. Talking about my father was the son of a village farmer who dreamed his only son to be an alim, an Islamic scholar. My father often told us the story of his childhood, when his relatives wanted him to be a modern educated man who could earn a decent living to make his family happy, and not a typical alim in the context of the then East Pakistan rural society, who would be a misfit in the society. One day, influenced by his relatives' advice, my father requested his mother to tell my granddad that he would no longer continue his religious education, rather would go to secular college. Upon hearing that, my grandfather did not talk to my father directly about this matter, and instead went straight to his madrasa and spoke to my father's teacher in front of him. He told his teacher that, tell my only son that I don't need him to feed me. I don't have any more son. Whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me would be sufficient for us. I want him to be a good Islamic scholar. Later, my grandfather saw the Prophet in his dream. He woke up and prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that may Allah make his son a shadow, a true follower of the Prophet. From that day onward, my father's only aim in life was to be a true follower of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, to the best of his ability. My father joined the Islamic movement as a student activist. A humble, soft-spoken person who came from a village became a keen student of Maulana Maududi. Soon after, he became the central president of Islami Jamiat-e-Talaba, Pakistan, the largest student organization of the then United Pakistan. As a result of secularization of the educational system and influence of communist revolution in different parts of the world, it was a trend in that then East Pakistan among the university students to be a communist or an ultra-secularist in 1960s and 70s. It was a huge challenge to go against all odds and start a new trend as an Islamist in those days. Jamaat-e-Talaba, under the leadership of my father, initiated a movement for Islamic educational system and an Islamic university. It was challenging at first. Jamaat-e-Talaba paid a heavy price and lost some of its most talented potentials like Shahid Abdul Malik, a colleague of my father. However, by the grace of Almighty Allah, success was achieved when the Islamic University was established in Bangladesh in late 70s. Although the then East Pakistan transforming into Bangladesh is often portrayed as a triumph of secular political movement, in that very Bangladesh, Islamists dominated the universities and other educational institutes by the grace of Almighty Allah. It is to be mentioned here, after the creation of Bangladesh, my father, considering his political exposure at that time, could have easily migrated from Bangladesh to settle anywhere in the world. It could have been safer for him. He could have contributed scholarly for the Islamic movement. However, Allah opened his heart for something else, something more rewarding in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He decided to stay in the country and devote himself to full-time da'wah. He and his colleagues knew exactly that they were putting themselves in for as countless Islamic scholars and politicians were brutally killed in the new secular country simply because they were not ready to accept secularism as an alternative to Islam. Holding different political opinion became a crime in the new state of Bangladesh, which was punishable by death. Despite that, my father and his colleagues' faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was unwavering, the result of which was truly amazing. Allah accepted their sincere effort and gave barakah in it in many folds. And within the next 45 years, Islamic movement was firmly established in the new country. My father soon became a popular social worker in the country and a popular political leader. He traveled all over the country, helping the poor and needy people, preaching Quran and Sunnah to them. Elected as a member of parliament twice, became a successful cabinet minister. He was not only a political leader, he was also a leading Islamic scholar of the country. He successfully handled numerous religious crises in Bangladesh. During his time, the conspiracy of branding Islam as a militant religion was dealt with diligently. He inspired ulamas to talk unequivocally against terrorism. He also wrote a book on the terrorism where he discussed the principles of Islam on that. He further discussed how this conspiracy targeted to derail Islamic movement from the right path and a way forward to overcome that. Despite his extremely busy schedule, he authored 22 Islamic books and numerous booklets, 3 of which were written inside the prison. He and his party's success caused his downfall as well. His successful run of 2 ministries over the period of 5 years could not be dented by any blame of failure or corruption, nor his 10 years tenure as an MP, Member of Parliament, could have been portrayed as a failure. Now, failing to do that, some 45 years old stories were cooked up to halt his progress. The pretext of that epic persecution of Jamaat-e-Islami Bangladesh, as indicated by my father in many speeches and write-ups, is as follows. World politics has changed forever following the incidents of 9/11. There is no need to talk about that in detail here. Any potential Islamic movement, no matter how democratic or non-violent they are, would no longer be dealt with sympathy. They will all receive harsh treatment sooner or later. The ultra-secular politicians of Bangladesh could not believe that Jamaat was able to run ministries like agriculture, industry, social welfare, let alone setting an example of honesty, diligence while running such ministries. In particular, when it was realized that a great Islamic scholar became a great minister of all time, it was the cause of much alarm. The victory of Hamas in Palestine in 2006 also worked as an aggravated factor. It was thought that if democracy continues, people would get fed up with corrupt politicians sooner and turn to Jamaat. In that context, the election in 2006 were postponed. An unelected, subservient caretaker government ruled the country for 2 years, eventually handed over power to Hawয League, who gradually unleashed the anti-Islamic conspiracy in Bangladesh. 3 elements were identified as obstacles in pursuit of their evil plan. First of all, the armed forces. Secondly, Jamaat-e-Islami. Third, Islamic education system. Step by step, they tried to eradicate these obstacles by first controlling the armed force, followed by mass arrest and torture and execution of Jamaat members. Finally, de-Islamization of educational system. My father was arrested on the 29th of June 2010. A series of cases filed against him, and following imprisonment of 6 years, Allah finally accepted him as a shaheed on 11th May 2016. As a lawyer and a son, I argued in the court against the false allegations made against my father. My father was a known political figure in 1971. News of his political activities used to be published in newspapers at that time. The prosecution submitted intelligence report of the then Pakistani government where the political activities of my father were described. There is not a single report on my father's alleged involvement with those crimes. Furthermore, after the emergence of Bangladesh, cases were filed against war criminals and their collaborators. Not a single case was filed against my father. Newspapers used to publish stories of war victims and culprits. No single report was published against my father at that time. Books were written on stories of war and war crimes. Not a single allegation was raised against my father. It was long after that war, after 16 years have passed, when my father first participated in the national election and established himself as a potential Jamaat leader, propaganda started against him. Even at that time, no specific allegation were made. It was long after 40 years, some people popped up out of nowhere and claimed that my father was with the culprits of war crimes in 1971 and he commanded them. There is no explanation why they were in those 40 years and why it took 40 long years to reveal the alleged involvement of my father with those crimes. Hawয League was in power for 2 terms before, from 1971 to 75 and from 1996 to 2001. Why they did not bring those allegations at that time? Despite all these odds and confusions, he was handed over death sentence and finally executed in May 2016. During his stay in the jail, he wrote 3 valuable books. Some articles were also published in pseudonym, where he gave important guidance for the Islamic movement. He also wrote some of his memoirs. All of these write-ups will be translated soon, inshallah, for the benefit of Ummah. Here are some pictures which we managed to take inside the jail despite the tight security. The night my father became shaheed, it was the night I wish it never came to my life, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to grant his servant a great honor on that night, and he decided to forgive him, inshallah. We were called by the authority and met our beloved father for the last time. It was a long meeting. My father made a long dua after giving us his last advices, wasiyah. We hugged him for the last time and left him for good. My father instructed me to lead his funeral prayer, which I was fortunate to do so. 26 janaza prayer were performed in the same place. Each one was bigger than the previous one. Countless salat al-ghaib was prayed all over the country and all over the world. During our last few visits, my father gave some advice for the Ummah, for my family, for the nation and for the Ummah. I was fortunate to make audio recording of those, and also in his write-ups we find some advice. So those which are important for the Ummah, I summarize those here. He advised that Islamic movement will be strengthened by these sacrifices of leaders. Islamic movement does not depend on few individuals. He categorically mentioned that the big names, Maulana Maududi, Hassanul Banna, Sayyid Qutb, all passed away. But Islamic movement remains as it is by the grace of Almighty Allah. Allah is the greatest guardian of Islamic movement. The activists of Islamic movement must not give up or lose hope. The biggest challenge of Islamic movement is not to be involved in militancy and stay within the society. Patience is the key in that regard. The life of the Prophet should be followed in light of the Quran, and similarly, the text of the Quran should be interpreted in the context of the Prophet's life. When the interest of Ummah is at stake, personal achievements and party interests need to be sacrificed. To prevent greater harm to the Ummah, alliance and power sharing with secular groups may be considered, but characteristics of Islamic movement must be mentioned. Activities of Islamic movement must adhere to Islamic etiquette in all aspects of life. I would like to conclude my presentation with a short speech of my father, which he gave when he took over the presidency of Jamaat in 2000 from late Professor Ghulam Azam. In that speech, he predicted his destination, and Allah accepted that. He said that Islamic movement going to face a severe test, and some people will be derailed, some people will be shaheed, and the rest who will be steadfast on the right track with iman and patience, Allah will give them the victory flag, inshallah.
প্রিয় ভাইয়েরা, জুলুমে ভরা বিশ্বাস ত্রাণকর্তার অপেক্ষায় আছে। বাংলাদেশের নির্যাতিত নিপীড়িত মানুষও মুক্তির প্রহর গুনছে। এই মুক্তি একটি সফল ইসলামী সমাজ বিপ্লব ছাড়া সম্ভব নয়। আজকে আমাদের কথার মাধ্যমে, আমাদের কাজের মাধ্যমে, আমাদের চাল চলন আচার ব্যবহারের মাধ্যমে, ময়দানে আমাদের জোরালো ভূমিকার মাধ্যমে দেশের মানুষকে এই মহা সত্য উপলব্ধি করাতে হবে, উপলব্ধি তাদের মধ্যে সৃষ্টি করতে হবে। এই ক্ষেত্রে আসুন আমরা একটি ঐতিহাসিক ভূমিকা পালন করি। আল্লাহ সুবহানাহু ওয়া তাআলার ওয়াদা আছে, একদল মানুষ যোগ্যতার সাথে, সততার সাথে দেশ জাতি সমাজ পরিচালনার যোগ্য বিবেচিত হলে, আল্লাহর দৃষ্টিতে বিবেচিত হলে আল্লাহ তাআলা বিশ্বজোড়া খেলাফত দেবেন। মুহাম্মদুর রাসূলুল্লাহ সাল্লাল্লাহু আলাইহি ওয়াসাল্লামের ভবিষ্যৎবাণী আছে, নবুয়তের পরে খেলাফতের যুগ আসার কথা। সেই ভবিষ্যৎবাণীর আলোকে নবুয়তের পর খেলাফতের যুগ এসেছিল। খেলাফতের যুগের অবসানের পর মুলকিয়াত রাজতন্ত্রের যুগের আসার কথা ছিল, সেটাও এসেছে। আজকে বিশ্বের 2-4টি দেশে যে রাজতন্ত্র আছে, এটা কয়েকদিনের মেহমান হিসেবে আছে। রাজতন্ত্রের অবসানের পর বিশ্বের দেশে দেশে যে সমাজ ব্যবস্থা, রাষ্ট্র ব্যবস্থা প্রতিষ্ঠিত হয়ে আছে, যে নামেই ডাকা হোক না কেন, তার আসল পরিচয় জুলুমতন্ত্র। বিশ্ব পরিস্থিতি, বর্তমান বিশ্ব পরিস্থিতি চোখে আঙুল দিয়ে আমাদের দেখিয়ে দিচ্ছে, এই বর্তমানে বিরাজমান জুলুমতন্ত্রের অবসানের দিনক্ষণ ঘনিয়ে এসেছে। এরপরই বিশ্বব্যাপী ইনশাআল্লাহ ইসলাম বিজয়ী শক্তি হিসেবে প্রতিষ্ঠিত হবে। ইসলামী আন্দোলন বিশ্বব্যাপী আজ পরীক্ষা নিরীক্ষা, ইমানের অগ্নি পরীক্ষার একটি স্তর অতিক্রম করছে। এই পরীক্ষায় যারা ফেল করবে, তারা কানে পায়ে সিদ্ধ করবে, আল্লাহর কিছু বান্দা শাহাদাত বরণ করবে, আর সবরে ইস্তেকামাতের সাথে ইমানি চেতনার উদ্বুদ্ধ হয়ে যারা ময়দানে টিকে থাকবে, ইনশাআল্লাহ তাদের হাতে ইসলামের বিজয়ের পতাকা অর্পিত হবে।
I would like to thank everyone and ask you to do dua for us, inshallah, so that Allah make Bangladesh a welfare Islamic country, inshallah, in future. Jazakumullah khair.